I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. Now my opening statement. You know, there's only one person who can keep Americans safe. And although it may have happened in another part of the world, it has crystallized an issue confronting us and will ultimately determine who moves into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in 2017. The ripples from the crash of Egypt Air Flight 804 have reached our shores and teed up the question, who will keep us safe? Take a listen to the contenders.
Do you think that Donald Trump is qualified to be president?
No, I do not.
She is so ill-equipped to be the president.
Now, to be clear, the cause of the flight's demise is yet undetermined. But each of the contenders has said the probable cause is terrorism. Trump tweets at 6:27 a.m., hours after the plane vanishes, looks like yet another terrorist attack. More than 7 hours after Trump's tweet, Hillary says it does appear that it was an act of terrorism. Now, I suspect the 7-hour or more than 7-hour difference reflects either Hillary's need to sleep late or to gauge the political winds. Now, economy is the #1 issue, terror #2. But I would venture a guess even more important than money for most is safety. So who will keep us safer? The polls, almost even a week ago, show most trust Donald Trump to do a better job than Hillary on terrorism. But each one of them says that we're safer with him or her. So where's the truth? Let's take a walk down memory lane, shall we? In spite of their protestations, the world is a more dangerous place since Barack Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton came to power. The so-called Arab Spring, sold as a refreshing movement toward democracy, was nothing more than a volcanic eruption, leaving a vacuum that barbaric medieval Islamists ran to fill. Now, Madam Secretary, you cannot deny it was you who lobbied for the overthrow of Libyan President Gaddafi, creating a descent into chaos and a welcome mat to terrorists. It was you, Madam Secretary, who didn't protect Ambassador Chris Stevens, instead responding to your so-called friend's plea for more security by actually reducing his security. And it was you who left Americans at that consulate when the Brits left and the Red Cross left because everybody else knew it was too dangerous. It was you who lied about a video when you told your own daughter that same night that it was an al-Qaeda-like attack in Benghazi. And you have the audacity to say the parents of those killed are basically liars when they repeated what you said. But then again, you talk a big game about terrorism.
Once again, shines a very bright light on the threats that we face from organized terror groups. ISIS, of course, but then there are other networks of terrorists that have to be hunted down and defeated.
You're going to hunt them down? Hillary, how long do your hunts take? Who's been brought to justice in the attack in Benghazi? And your doublespeak for the last 7.5 years. When a shooter yells Allahu Akbar and kills Americans at Fort Hood, we're supposed to call it workplace violence. And after Benghazi, the word Islamic is removed from the term Islamic extremist because we don't want to inflame their anger, as if they don't already want to kill us. By the way, Hillary, why haven't you taken a clear position on the release of those 28 sealed pages in the 9/11 Commission report that discusses Saudi Arabia's role? Could it be because the Persian Gulf states, notorious for their own human rights violations, and their leaders reportedly donated as much as $100 million to your family's so-called charity? Question: why would these Arabs give money to the Clintons instead of helping those in their own countries? After all, Hillary, charity doesn't begin at the Clinton Foundation. It begins at home. And you're going to keep us safe? Your own State Department's refugee program can't even vet refugees coming here. And what's that? All those are only words? You have everyone so fearful of being called an Islamophobe that ordinary Americans didn't report suspicious deliveries at the home of the Islamic terrorists who killed 14 in San Bernardino. And you're going to keep us safe, Hillary? Hell, you can't even keep top secret intelligence on your BlackBerry without Russia, China, and a Romanian hacker accessing it. So how can you keep us safe when you speak a different language from ordinary Americans? How can you keep us safe when you can't even say who the enemy is? It's not violent extremists. It's not terrorists. It's Islamic extremists. It's Islamic terrorists. And you can't mouth the words. Say it. Say it. But you won't. This isn't a parlor game, and not one for the faint of heart. So go back to bed, Hillary. There's someone else who's going to protect us. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page or Twitter, hashtag Judge Jeanine. And with me now is Donald Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. Corey, good evening. Let me ask you this. How can Donald Trump convince ordinary Americans when he doesn't have a record of foreign policy to refer to that he can keep us safer than Hillary Clinton, who can at least say she was Secretary of State and United States Senator and First Lady?
Well, hey, thanks for having me on, number one. And number two, let's go back and look at that Clinton record. It has been a dismal disaster from the very beginning. And I think what the American people want is exactly what you alluded to at the beginning of your show, is safety at home. They want to know that they can get on an airplane and that they'll be safe when they land. They want to know that their homes will be protected, that there'll be jobs for them, that our country's going to be placed first again. That's not the case with Hillary Clinton. What we have seen in her administration through the time of Secretary of State, whether she was a U.S. Senator or the First Lady, is nation building outside of our country and giving those special privileges to everyone except Americans. And what we know with Donald Trump, he would put Americans first. He'll put our people back to work and renegotiate our trade deals so that for a change, people can be proud to be Americans again, and that's what this country needs.
And what do you say to those who say that Donald Trump's statement that, halting Muslim influx until we can figure out what's going on is actually racist?
Well, it's not racist at all. What we have is a failed immigration policy right now. We don't know who's coming into our country. We don't know who's crossing our borders. We couldn't even do simple background checks on social media for these people before we bring them in. And what we want to do is put a temporary hold. Let's just look and make sure that our government, which isn't doing their job properly, can vet these people so that we know we're not bringing terrorists into our country.
But what we saw in San
Bernardino, was we saw a woman come into our country who was a radical terrorist. She radicalized her husband, and they killed 14 people. And they came in on a K-1 visa because they couldn't do a simple social media background check. That's what's wrong with our country. We need to do a better job to protect our own citizens.
Will we ever be able to do background checks on refugees? I mean, they're not coming out of these countries, with their license or registration and their criminal justice record.
Well, so then let's ask ourselves, what do we bring the refugees to our country for? Why aren't they staying in the region of the world? And we'll create a safe zone for them, and they can stay in the region of the world where they're most comfortable. Tell me what the value is of bringing people into our country who we know absolutely nothing about. We can't do a background check. We don't know who these people are. And then when they come into the country, candidly, we lose them. We can't even build a wall in front of Mexico to stop people from crossing the border and killing Americans in San Francisco. What makes us think that once we let these refugees in, they're going to stay where we ask them to stay, and they're not going to go off on their own merry way and be a burden on our country?
Okay,
let's
Corey.
control our borders for a change.
Okay, Corey, look, Donald Trump admittedly is not doing as well with women as Hillary is, and she's not doing as well with men as he is. But given his endorsement by the NRA yesterday, do you think this helps or hurts him with women?
Well, look, again, women are not single-issue voters, and this is what the misnomer is. Donald Trump is doing exceptionally well with people who they always said he never would. In the last poll that came out, he has a 10-point lead amongst Hispanics over Hillary Clinton. They said originally he would never have that lead. He's now leading her by 10 points. And what women want, in my opinion, and you're one judge, you know better than I do, is they want safety for their homeland. They want safety for their families. They want to make sure they have good-paying jobs. They want to make sure they can take care of their families. They're not single-issue voters, so this notion that Donald Trump doesn't do well with women is crazy. 30 years ago, When he started building his business,
but you know
he put
what?
women in the highest positions possible, and they still run those businesses today.
Okay, look, a Fox News poll we have shows that with women, Clinton's 50%, Trump's 36, men 33 for Clinton, and men 55 for Trump. So Hillary's got 14 points up on women than Donald does. So that's the latest poll that we have from Fox.
Yeah, but we also have the polls that show that he does unbelievably well with African Americans, that he does unbelievably well with Hispanics. He is bringing everyone together. And don't forget, he has been the presumptive nominee for exactly 2 weeks. We haven't even started on Hillary Clinton yet. She has a failed record as Secretary of State, as U.S. Senator, and I think Donald Trump is going to highlight that failure, and it's going to bring those women to us because they want safety.
All right. Now, as you know, I've been in 5 campaigns, and I know there's a lot of tensions in campaigns. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of competition. And recently we're hearing about some tensions in the Trump campaign. Now, Paul Manafort, is he now the chairman of the campaign? And how does that affect your role and what's going on in the campaign?
Sure. So this is typical media, want to hype something that isn't there. But let me tell you what's going on. Our campaign has 70 people on a total running a presidential campaign. Hillary Clinton's campaign has 732 people in it. So we're small, we're tight-knit, we're working very well together, and we're going to continue to grow and bring more people in. But you also have to look at the mindset. Is what we can accomplish with a small group is the mindset that our government needs. Look at the amount of money that our campaign has spent compared to Hillary Clinton. She spent $182 million. We've spent $60 million, a third of what she has spent, and candidly, we're doing much better. Millions of more votes than anybody else in the Republican field Donald Trump has gotten. What you have to do in scenarios like this is you bring people in.
What's your title on the campaign?
I'm the campaign manager, and that's not going to change. I'm the campaign manager, and it's such a privilege.
Campaign manager. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Judge.
All right. And joining me now, live from Paris, best-selling author and screenwriter Dan Gordon, who also serves as a captain in the reserves of the Israeli Defense Forces. Good evening, and thank you, Dan, for being up so late tonight. I understand that you got to Paris the day after the Egypt Air flight crashed, correct?
Yes, actually, I flew to Paris a few hours after the crash, and I was shocked that when I got to Charles de Gaulle Airport, absolutely no one checked my passport. I could have come in from anywhere. No one knew who I was, let alone if I was on a terrorist watch list. I think that's one of the main problems that is facing Europe right now.
But, you know, Dan, what's so surprising is that President Hollande, after the attack in Paris in November of 2015, seemed more determined than ever to make sure that people coming into France through Charles de Gaulle would be people who would be vetted for the safety of his own French citizens. Is that not happening?
It certainly wasn't happening the day that I came here, and you're right about President Hollande. After the Bataclan attacks in just 6 months ago, in which 130 people were killed in 6 different locations in Paris, President Hollande said this act of war was prepared, decided upon, and planned in Syria, organized in Belgium, and carried out on our territory with the complicity of citizens of France. And I think that summed up the problem that the Europeans face in a nutshell. They've lost control of their borders, and they've allowed pockets of Islamist extremism to exist, and they're paying a price for it.
And so, you know, with the downing of Egypt Air, and we still, I have to say, don't know whether or not it was an act of terrorism, but are there any international standards so that I have these statistics that every year something like 12 million, 13 million Americans go to Europe? How do you think this is going to affect overseas travel, and which are the carriers that you think people should or shouldn't be flying?
Well, look, I think the terrorist strategy is already starting to work. Paris right now is, quite frankly, deserted. There's a complete lack of tourism. People who would generally find crowds in the cafes and the various squares in Paris. It's deserted and it's empty, and that's by design from the terrorist point of view. They've succeeded in that regard. the carriers that they target usually are national carriers. If you look at our own experience, they attacked American Airlines, United Airlines. I think until we're proved differently, we have to assume that this was an act of terrorism, because if you look back at history, Al-Qaeda placed a bomb in 1994 on Philippine Air 434 and never took credit for it, because they planned to place 12 such bombs on 12 different airplanes in Project Bojinka in 1995. So the fact that no one's taken credit for this actually is very disturbing to me.
Okay, and so you think it may be a trial run?
I think it may be a trial run, because usually, even if there had been a crash of an airplane, one terrorist organization or another would have taken responsibility simply to establish street cred. So the fact that no one's taken responsibility, I think, is a bit sinister if we look at history and see that's exactly what Ramzi Youssef did in 1994.
All right, Dan Gordon, stay safe over there in Paris. But, of course, we still don't know the cause of the downing of that jet. Thank you. All right, and Mike Huckabee still ahead tonight. And next, I'll break down the general election with pollster